There's so much to do in private practice and so many resources and trainings and things like that to focus on that we've brought it all together for you for a totally free event starting March 11th and going till March 14th. Level Up Week 2024 is coming up, and I want you to save that date. We have some amazing panels we're planning where we're bringing together people that have started a private practice, people that have started a group practice, and people that are rocking out mega group practices. Also, we're going to have some amazing keynotes and some trainings that are on very practical things. There's no need for you to bounce between Facebook groups wondering, is this advice good? What should I do next? I don't even know of the 50 things that I need to be working on what I should do first. Instead, come to Level Up Week. It's totally free. You can be on the early bird list over at practiceofthepractice.com/level up to get all the early notifications for when we open up registration. So again, that's practiceofthepractice.com/level up. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 953. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. I'm so glad that you are taking time out of your day today to hear us have a conversation, to build into your business, to think about how to thrive differently in your private practice, and to build it into something that you absolutely love. We have so many people that are in our membership communities that are getting help in their solo practice with Next Level Practice, in Group Practice Launch, Group Practice Boss, Audience Building Academy, all of those different programs. But when it comes down to it, we are running businesses. And I remember when I was interviewing a friend of mine who's local. She was actually a morning host person, but she was also really good with business. And she was Mary in the Morning here in Northern Michigan. And right when I moved back to Northern Michigan, I became her call-in therapist 2 times a month. On Tuesday mornings, I would get up at 6:30 in the morning to go be on her show before I went into my full-time job to promote my private practice. And one thing Mary said really early on was that, Joe, you don't have a job, you have a business. And that really stuck with me. Even though I had my full-time job, my private practice, even when I was a solopreneur, was a business. And I was treating it like it was just another job that I showed up for, got paid, and then just left. And that's why I'm so excited to dig in even deeper with Sarah today. Sarah Duran is an operational expert who spent over a decade helping people and organizations turn their ideas into action. On top of her business strategy expertise, she's also a coach who helps solopreneurs live up to their highest potential. Sarah, welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I am so excited to talk about boss mindset, to talk about, thinking about our business as a business, not a job. Before we dig into that, tell us a little bit about how you got to this point to do this kind of work.
Sure. So it's very connected to today's topic. I actually started my career in the education sector. I was a teacher. I worked for a variety of nonprofits in the education sector after that. And I had great jobs. And I got to a point where working for other people just wasn't giving me what I needed. I didn't actually know at that juncture that working for myself was even an option, but I made a decision to quit my job at the time and sort of do some exploration to figure out what I wanted to do next. And through that process, I ended up picking up some contract work to keep myself afloat as I was figuring all of that out because the bills still have to get paid. And lo and behold, what I learned, over the course of about a year of doing that is that working for myself gave me this incredible level of freedom that I didn't even know was possible when I was working for other people. And so about a year in, I decided that this was the thing that I was going to do. The contract work turned into what is now my company. And so I've had my company for almost a decade now. And what I've been doing over the last about 4 years is, like I said, I learned as I continued to work for myself and continued to get better at my business, the level of freedom that I was able to leverage in my life just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I wanted to be able to help other people achieve that same level of freedom, especially people who are what I call solopreneurs. So they work primarily by themselves. It doesn't mean that you don't have some subcontractors or like maybe a partner or something like that, but primarily you work by yourself. You don't have like a capital C company. And so that's what I do now. In addition to the work that I do for the client facing side of my business, so the project management facing side of my business, where I work directly one on one with clients as a business consultant, I also run a coaching program and create a ton of content for other solopreneurs. And I think having those two things, those two sides of my business is really important because I never want to be a coach or business guru who is just telling people how to do things in theory. I want to be someone who is really putting those practices into work in my business every single day, and then being able to work with people from a baseline understanding of what it actually looks like in practice.
Mm. Now, when as you were leaving teaching and, eventually starting your own business, I know for me, when I left full-time jobs, my narrative as a child, which I often talk about in here is, work hard, get good grades, someone will hire you. My parents both worked for the school system. Also, I think that generation had good retirement, had good pensions, and that's not necessarily true of our generations. But what for you were some of those mindsets early on as you were really teaching yourself how to have your own business, have that mindset that really were helpful early on?
Oh, it's such a good question. So I actually have both of my parents are entrepreneurs. And so my parents own their own business, still own their own business to this day, although they're in the process of getting ready to retire. And so I actually grew up in an entrepreneurial family. And that's one of the reasons why I sort of was like, I just want someone else to tell me what to do. Like, my parents are incredibly successful. And I also watched, how hard it is running a business, especially when you have employees who you're responsible for their livelihood, not just your own. And so growing up, I was just like, I had a very similar mindset to that where I was like, I definitely like type A high achiever. Like, I was very ambitious in what I wanted to do and be in the world. And I also was like, I don't want to have all that responsibility. I want someone else to tell me what to do. And when I realized, I think the first thing is that, like I said in the beginning, I didn't actually realize that working for yourself, like by yourself, was even a viable option. I think I thought that working within like an organization or a company was like the easiest way to have job security and be able to like climb, the socioeconomic ladder and all of those kinds of things. And the first thing that I realized when I started working for myself is that I was able to not only really zero in on like what I was like meant to do in the world. Like, I was no longer doing all the peripheral things that other people thought should be my job. I was really focusing in on like, what do I think my job should be, and who am I here to serve? And as I got more and more specific with that, it also allowed me to do things in a shorter amount of time for a much greater amount of money than I ever could, working for other people. So the mindsets in the beginning, I think, um, were I came into it with a mindset of like, that additional level of responsibility is too much for me. Um, and what I realized is that having that different level of responsibility is what gives you that freedom. I think it's the trite phrase of, with freedom comes responsibility, which I think is 100% true. But it also let me see like a different level of fulfillment that I never really felt, even though I had these incredible jobs working with incredible people.
Hmm. Now, as you're doing more consulting with solopreneurs and helping them, let's really dig into that switch into having a boss mindset, of a
Mhm.
CEO mindset, running a business, not just creating money as sort of like a new job. What are some of the things that people need to leave, and what do they need to move towards in regards to developing that new mindset?
It's a great question. So I sort of think about boss mindset in three like subcategories. So I think about it in terms of your work, your worth, and your wisdom. And so for your work, it's really first realizing that you have to be both a visionary and a doer at the same time. I think that we are, um, when we work in organizations, we are often told that you can only be one or the other, especially hierarchical organizations where some people strategize and other people do. Um, and when you work for yourself, you have to be able to do both. Are some people naturally inclined to do one thing or the other? Absolutely. But it means that either you have to figure out how to be able to compensate for the piece of that that doesn't come as naturally to you, whether that's with different systems or whether that's with like other supportive people, partners, or other contractors that support your business. But you have to fundamentally come at it with a mindset that, like, I don't get to just strategize and I don't get to just do. I have to really be able to do both. Um, I think the other thing about work is that you have to be able to be very clear, which is a journey. I think we all get more and more clear about this as we progress in our business. But getting clear continuously over time about who you serve and the problems that you solve for them. Because I think a lot of us come into um, work thinking, well, having other people made those decisions for us. So when you work for other people, they sort of tell you, like, this is who we serve, this is what we do. And you don't always have to figure that out for yourself. When you're a solopreneur, you have to be able to figure out and really own and recognize and learn over time who you are best positioned to serve, because you can't, as long as you're trying to be everything to everyone, you're going to be nothing to no one. Like, no one is going to hear your message if you're just trying to talk to everyone. um I would say one other piece around work is also just understanding that you get to decide when you work and when you rest. And so I think that we all get into this mindset where we think we have to work 40 hours a week and we think we have to work 9 to 5 because that's what happened when we worked for other people. Um, and when you get to decide how you do your work, you get to a certain extent decide also when and how you do your work. Um, and I think that can look a little bit different for people like your audience who have a practice where you're also doing one-on-one work with other people. So clearly, you are also organizing and orienting yourself around their schedule. But I think we get to redefine what work looks like for ourselves. We get to redefine what time looks like, what money looks like. And we don't always have to fit into the same types of boxes and structures that existed for us when we work for other people.
Mm. Yeah. So when you look at kind of practical steps that people take, they start to enact more of these mindsets. What does it look like in regards to things that they stop doing or things that they really start doing in regards to, I used to do this when I had a mindset where I wasn't really thinking through this as the boss. And where do you see people starting to put in different building blocks to make that solo practice more professional?
So I think a really big one is prioritizing developing yourself. So I think we are all sort of sold this narrative that we have to be developed by other people. And when you work for yourself, I hear tons of the people that I work with talk about professional development for themselves, whether it's coaching, whether it's courses, whether it's ongoing learning as a quote unquote luxury. And I think we have to really reframe that thinking to know that developing ourselves is not a luxury. It is something that is crucial to our growth as humans, as solopreneurs, as business owners, and we have to support that. We have to prioritize that. We have to see it as something that is important to our business development. Another one that goes really hand in hand with that, I think, is pricing and budgeting. And so if you're pricing yourself and thinking about money in the same way you did when someone else was taking care of the money, it is fundamentally not going to work, because when you are a business, you have to really understand all of the pieces that go into your business. I think that really runs the gamut from like marketing metrics to client satisfaction. But in terms of budget, you have to be pricing yourself like a business. And so you can't be pricing yourself the same way you priced yourself when you were working for someone else. You really have to take into account all of the things that go into your business. And that should include things that I think most solopreneurs think that they don't deserve just because they don't work for a company or have a big team or something like that. I think professional development definitely falls into that category. I think the other things that can fall into that category is time off, or benefits. And so making sure that you are thinking about pricing yourself like a business so that you are covering the costs for the professional development you need, for you to not be working 24/7, for you to have the benefits and support that you need, whether like retirement, insurance, whatever that stuff is. You have to be factoring all of that in when you're thinking about how you're pricing yourself to clients.
Yeah, I think that's one of those things that is such a shift for people when they're looking at even just taxes when you're your own business compared to, when you're working for somebody else and thinking through all those bonuses. When I was leaving my full-time job, I created this calculator of kind of how to leave my job, and I would put all of my payroll things in. And then, oftentimes people are like, "Oh, I'm charging 175 a session." And then they're like, "Well, I get paid this much every 2 weeks," and they would just figure out how many sessions they had to do, but they didn't factor in all the taxes, all the retirement, all those things. And so we put together this how to leave your job calculator that I can have them put in the show notes. But it really is, you put in your payroll and then say, what do you need to charge in order to make this, in all the different costs that go into running a practice. And oftentimes it's way more money than you think it's going to be,
Mhm.
and you either need to do higher quantity of sessions or raise your prices.
Yeah. And I think all of that circles, I mean, I love that calculator. I think
Mhm.
everyone should have a how to leave my job calculator.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that really circles back to just like making sure that you're thinking about, I think even within that, we can still fall into a trap of being like, it has to look like this because this is what it looked like when I work for other people. And so really pushing yourself to think outside of the box about like, what do I need? And like, what do I actually want to be doing with my time? I think the other thing that circles back to is like just getting more clear about and more focused in on like your specific audience and like specifically how you're helping them, because I think the more we can the more we specialize, and that can look like, I think that can look especially for your audience in a way with like actual specialization, right? Like different like types of licensing and things like that. But I also think it can be like, who do you focus on? What type of people do you focus on? Who do you like working with best? Because I think the more you try to position yourself as a big fish in a small pond, instead of the other way around, people are way more willing to pay you a higher rate instead of being just like, I'm this generic person that can do this for anyone.
Yeah, yeah. If you're looking for an awesome payroll solution, look no further than Gusto. We have used them for years here at Practice of the Practice. They keep me organized, we know how much taxes we're paying, and it's all done right, and you get pay stubs that look like any other company. Head on over to gusto.com/Joe to learn all about their payroll solutions. There is no reason that you should be worrying about payroll. Do it right. Head on over to gusto.com/Joe. That's GUSTO.com/Joe. Now, when people start to add clinicians to their private practice, when you think about going from being a solopreneur to an organization of some sort, what are challenges that you see in regards to leveling up somebody's boss mindset?
So I would say the first one is really, really, really asking yourself and sitting with it before you make that decision of if you really want to be managing other people. I think a lot of us get to a point, especially solopreneurs, especially I would say folks in your audience who like you are doing this one-on-one work with clients. And so the way you can do that is your time is extremely limited, right? And so I think a lot of us get to this point in our business where we're getting more and more work. And the natural thing that people tell us to do is like, well, it's time to hire a team. And that totally may be the right path for people. But I've seen a lot of people who end up taking that step and then they realize that they don't actually like managing people. They would rather just be doing the work instead of managing other people to do the work. And not to say when you hire other people, it has to look that way, that you aren't still like doing the work. But I think that's the first one, is like really thinking about what you want, like going back to like what you really want out of your work and what that should look like for you, so that you don't, because I think if you make that decision and then retroactively figure out that's not what you want, then you are beholden to other people, not just yourself. You're sort of messing up other people's lives if you sort of retroactively have to decide that, oh, that's actually not what I want. So I think just being really clear about that up front for yourself, of like, what does this mean to broaden my practice? I think there's also different ways of thinking about that, whether it's like actual staff or like partners or like other like contractors and things like that. I think all of those dynamics are a little bit different. But I think if that's the decision you make, then you get to a place where your responsibility is now not just to yourself. So once you start bringing on a team, it is a fundamental mindset shift to think about, I am now sharing the responsibility of the success of this business with this team. So I'm no longer able to just make decisions about what I want my time to look like and what I want the company to look like. It becomes sort of a broader effort, which can totally be the right fit for people. I think people just need to go into it very consciously.
Mm. Now, where do people get stuck? We all like kind of level up at certain times and plateau at other times. When you see people plateau, what common things are you seeing when maybe they've made some changes, they've kind of had that boss mindset, but then they plateau, go back to old habits, things like that. Like, what is it that tends to cause a plateau?
I see people actually get stuck in these, like, I sort of think about solopreneurship in these like three different phases. So a lot of us start off with this, like what I call like a Jill of all trades, where you're sort of exploring what you are like best positioned to do, what your business model should be, all those kinds of things. And you're sort of in this place where you are being everything to everyone to a certain extent. And that's like a totally natural place to start, because you don't really know how you want to focus in until you've done a little bit of that exploration phase. I often see people get stuck in between that phase, and the next phase is what I call a scaling solopreneur. You get stuck there when you start bringing, like, this sort of what we were talking about before. When you start bringing on, starting to get more and more clients, your time is starting to get more and more constrained, and you are not making the systematic shift in both your mindset and your business to think about what it looked like to do this as an individual versus what it looks like to do it at scale. And so a lot of times we're not making shifts to our structures or our support capacity or even our own mindset and how we're taking care of ourselves. And then we wake up one day and realize that we're working 60 hours a week and we're on the verge of burnout. And so I think making sure that you're regularly checking in with yourself to watch when systems especially start to crumble, because what supported you as like an individual consultant is not going, and with like a handful of, I'm sorry, consultant is a word that is not applicable to your audience. When you're shifting from supporting like the clients that only you can support to sort of starting to think differently about your business and how you're thinking about scaling, that is a big mindset shift and is also a really key structural shift that you have to make. And that is a process of sort of trial and error, right? Because our businesses and ourselves are constantly shifting and changing. I think the other one that sort of, I think, catches people off guard is what I call when you get to this like micro business phase. So if you've gotten to the micro business phase, this might mean that you have brought on some other team members or whatever that looks like for you, but like you've sort of got it dialed in. You're like, I figured this out. I know who I serve. I know what I do. I've got the structures figured out. And you start to get bored because on paper, everything is working exactly how it's supposed to be. But I think a lot of us with an entrepreneurial mindset go out on our own because we like the challenge of creating and learning and doing something new. And when you get everything dialed in, the challenge just isn't the same. And so I actually see a lot of people who get to that place and they're like, I don't know, like everything is on paper looks great. Like why am I not satisfied? Why am I not fulfilled? Anyone else would kill for this business and it's just not doing it for me anymore. And they really have to give themselves permission to reinvent something, whether it's completely reinventing their business, pivoting in some way, or just doing something different for themselves. But that's another key place that I think people get stuck that often catches people off guard.
Mm. Why do you think people aren't fulfilled when they get to that level?
I mean, like I said, I really think it is just like this, it's no longer the same level of challenge. So when you're built, um there's this really natural joy in like building something new, creating something new, solving all these problems, figuring out how to structure things, figuring out how to, best serve your clients, all those things. And I think once we get to a place where we've sort of quote unquote figured those things out, the challenge just isn't there anymore, and sometimes we need to introduce another type of challenge in a new way.
Mm. So awesome. Well, the last question I always ask is, if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
I would just say stay true to yourself and follow your instincts. Don't think that you have to do your business or be the way everyone else around you looks, or the way it looked when you worked for someone else. I would say encourage yourself to think outside the box about what your business can look like to make sure that it's giving you the life that you want.
Mm. And Sarah, if people want to connect with you, if they want to follow your work, where's the best place to send them?
So you can find everything about me on my website at fruitioninitiatives.com. I love it when people come find me on LinkedIn at Sarah Duran. And I also have a Substack and a podcast called The Hustler's Manifesto.
So awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Well, if you're looking for resources, we have a ton of resources on the Practice of the Practice website. I'm not going to go through all of them, but recently our team, we've really built up our IT team. So if you're looking for any IT support, just go over to our support services area on Practice of the Practice. We have tons of ways that we can support you in building websites and helping out in regards to your social media, implementing AI in your practice. Jean and the whole team are just doing such an amazing job. So check that out over at the brand new Practice of the Practice website. We just recently updated that whole website. It was a giant project. So if you need any sort of support, we have lots of ways that we can support and take things off of your plate for you to move faster. And, we couldn't do this show without our amazing sponsors like Gusto. Gusto, as a small business owner for me, paying and taking care of the team and getting, the benefits and taxes and all of that stuff is just really hard to figure out sometimes. So Gusto makes it way easier. And right now, our listeners are getting 3 months totally free. Just head on over to gusto.com/Joe. It's where we run our payroll. Again, that's gusto.com/Joe. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.